Yo, what's up, guys? This is Akash here, and today I'm here to share a pretty sexy chess game that I played not too long ago. This was for a rapid tournament that one of my friends hosted for 2,200 rated players or above, so my opponent's quite a strong player, and let's just get right into it. Alright, so the game began with d4, knight f6, bishop f4, London system, c5. c5 is a pretty challenging move. It tends to take London players outside of their comfort zone, really challenging the center and asking white what they're going to be playing. So I took d takes c5. This is something that I do pretty regularly against these c5 type of positions. Queen a5 check, forking the king and the pawn. Knight c3, queen takes c5, e4. I really like this move because it grabs control of the center, opens up the diagonal for the bishop, and gives me a sort of flexible position. So if you're looking into playing the London system and you're interested in these d takes c5 lines, maybe consider this type of game because it's pretty comfortable for white. My opponent plays d6, pretty normal move. Knight f3, knight c6, queen d2. I like this move because it builds some flexibility in the position. I can choose to castle queenside if I want. I'm not necessarily going to do that because of the open c file here, but it's a move that is kind of non-committal for white, and you introduce some flexibility into your game. So I really like this queen d2 move. Bishop e6, kind of a strange move for my opponent. I think more normal would have been something like pawn to e5. And yeah, maybe this pawn is a little bit weak, but black is contesting the center. This d4 square is definitely going to be a battleground for the rest of the game. So I think this would have been a little bit better for black. But bishop e6 is not a losing move, just maybe slightly inaccurate. So I play bishop d3, knight to g4, castle, a6, h3, knight e5. This is the purpose of knight g4, knight to e5, to relocate the knight here and start to ask, okay, what is the bishop doing really on d3? So I take, trying to diffuse a little bit of the tension in the center. Knight takes e5, bishop e3, queen a5. And now I played knight d5, which in hindsight I kind of regret. I think instead of knight d5, probably something like f4 is better. I was a little bit worried about knight to c4 and thought, okay, I'm going to be losing the bishop pair. This bishop is the good bishop. This bishop's the bad bishop due to the pawns on the light squares. And sorry, there was just some fly there. I don't know how that got in here. But yeah, knight to c4, actually, it's not so bad though, because bishop takes c4, bishop takes c4. And yes, I did forfeit my bishop pair, and black does have the bishop pair. But black's development is still lagging, and I do have these nice pawns on e4 and f4, which give me good central control. Not to mention, my development is pretty much complete, so I still, in theory, should have the initiative here. And I think that this position is quite good for white, and the engine seems to agree. I think it's about like a 1.2 or 1.3 advantage for white. But anyways, bishop e3, queen a5. I played knight d5. I wanted to kind of put some pressure on this c7 square. I mean, right now the queen is defending it, but the queen is being attacked, so there might be some chances there. But again, f4 would have probably been the wiser choice. So my opponent does queen d2, bishop d2, bishop d5, e d5, knight takes d3, and c takes d3. Now, this is actually quite an interesting point in the game. I mean, you look at these pawns, right? This pawn on d5, pawn on d3. They're isolated and doubled. So at a first glance, it might look like black is a little bit better here, which is, I think, why my opponent decided to exchange all of these pieces. But it's really not the case, actually. Notice that this bishop is a dark squared bishop, so it's actually not going to be able to attack these pawns because these pawns are going to remain on light squares. I'm not going to be playing some move like d4 to create a target for that bishop. So that bishop's not really going to be a good way to harass these pawns. Plus, this d5 pawn is sort of cramping my opponent's style. It's taking up a lot of space, and it really asks black, okay, how are you going to expand? How are you going to develop your pieces? And so the way that this game unfolds is kind of indicative of the strengths of these pawns, particularly this d5 pawn. So my opponent castles queenside, which is probably a mistake, to be honest. But to be honest, I do sympathize with him because it's not so easy to come up with a plan. Black really needs to find a way to develop his pieces because he's severely lacking in development. The engine gives this line h5, h4, and I'm not totally sure what the point is. Maybe it's like g6, bishop h6, or bishop g7, something like this. But, I mean, already black is floundering, so it speaks to the difficulty of the position that he has in front of him. So black castled queenside. I play bishop a5. Now I played this move because I wanted to exploit the weak dark squares on the king side, or the queen side here. Sorry. Note that black's pawns are on light squares, a6 and b7, and a common theme in positional chess is that when you have pawns on one color, oftentimes the other colors around them, the other squares around them, are quite weak. So what this bishop a5 move does is it really exploits the weaknesses in black's queen side and starts to ask him, okay, like, what are you going to do? I have a very good position. And already the rook is attacked, so my opponent plays rook d7. But note that the rook is running out of room already. There's no moves that he can make right now, and this rook is going to be a constant challenge for black to deal with. So rook ac1 check, king b8. Actually, I just wanted to show a quick line here. If black plays something like rook e8, it's not a good move at all. But I might have rook c1, and if black tries to play king d7 with the idea of like e6 and trying to break through the center, deal with this d5 pawn, I have rook c7 check, and king d8. This is about to be very, very bad for black. There might already be a mating threat with rook c1, but worst case scenario, I have rook takes b7 with the discovered check on the king. But probably rook c1, just squeezing his position is better. Rook c1, and then, yeah, actually this is just checkmate. There's nothing black can do to stop rook b7. Maybe b6 just temporarily, but bishop takes b6, and then that's forced mate. So rook d7, rook c1 check, king b8. I played bishop b6, and I actually showed this to a friend of mine who's a grandmaster, and he was a little bit critical of this move. He said that it's a little bit of a waste of time, but I kind of disagree, just because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to clamp down on black's position, and with the bishop on b6, this b7 pawn is not going anywhere. This king is constantly stuck. This rook is slicing into his territory. Rook c7 is, of course, never possible because I just take. And I like these sort of squeezing moves. And it's kind of paralyzing black's queen side, which is kind of my point, because I want to squeeze the life and the play out of my opponent. So I play bishop b6, g6, logical move. Black is just trying to find any way to develop his pieces. Rook c2. The point of this move is to double up the rooks on the c file and then maybe invade with rook c7. Maybe something like rook c4 is a little bit more accurate. The rook is better on c4 than c2 just because, you know, it could swing here, maybe it could swing here. Just maybe a slight improvement there. But okay, rook c2, bishop h6. My opponent's playing bishop h6 because he does not want me to double up on the c file with this rook. So it's a logical response from him. And I played f4. Now, when I was talking to my grandmaster friend about this, I showed him this game, and he was critical of this f4 move. And I think it's actually quite an instructive moment, something I did not realize, something I can improve on. I'm playing f4 because I'm trying to be consistent with this plan to double up on the c file. But if I had, you know, looked a little bit, let's see, I played f4 with in 11 seconds here, but there's a better idea here. There's actually the move rook e1. The point of this move is to double up the rooks a little bit differently on c4 here, but also it's prophylaxis against e6 or e5. This is the only real way for black to try to challenge white. Otherwise, his pieces are just so disconnected and they cannot harmonize together. You want to try to harmonize your pieces as much as possible. Pieces don't really, they can work well in isolation, but they work better when they're able to cooperate with their friends. So I think rook e1 would have been an improvement on my in my position, but okay, f4. White's still better here. And g5, this is a move that is probably it's probably a blunder. I mean, maybe it might seem a little bit harsh to say that. Black's plan here is to force the matter and make sure I can't get my rook on c1. So he's trying to contest this diagonal. You know, if I play something like f5, maybe he'll sack the pawn with g4 and then guarantee that he has control of this diagonal. But the problem is simply that it's just it's just losing a pawn. So takes, bishop takes, rook takes f7. And now this position, this is why I call this a sexy game. Black's pieces are totally disconnected and they cannot coordinate. There's really no way to coordinate. With this rook on f7, this pawn is pinned. He can never really create the break that he wants to. This rook is totally stuck. This king is totally stuck. The only real piece that has any breathing room is this bishop. Maybe you could say the rook too, but there's just no play for black. Black is completely paralyzed. And after bishop f6, you know, it looks like the rook is stuck, but how are you going to attack the rook? There's no light squared bishop here to harass this rook. And there's no way for maybe something like this, but like rook g8, rook g7, I'm mating him with rook f8. So black is completely paralyzed. And I'd like to give you guys maybe 5 to 10 seconds to pause your video and try to find a winning plan for white. White is almost +4, +5, something like that in this position. So just take a moment, please pause your videos and try to come up with the answer. Okay, so hopefully you were able to find a winning solution. The whole point is, you know, black's pieces are paralyzed and white's pieces are so well placed, and how are we going to continue the fight? Well, there's only one piece that's really not in the battle right now, and that is His Majesty, the king on g1. So the move here is king f2. And so black plays h5. It's already lost though, unfortunately. This is just completely lost for black. King f3. And again, with this idea of color complexes that we've talked about, black's pawns are in dark squares. Black has a dark squared bishop. So the weak point is e6. So h4, king e4. You know, king f4 is something that I was considering, but it's just it's not as precise. e5, it's a check, discovered attack on the rook. I have to do en passant. Rook takes f7, f takes, or e takes f7, maybe like rook f8, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pawns to 1, 2, 3, 4. Black's gonna be picking up this pawn, potentially, and it's still completely winning for white. But why? Why give him this? There's no reason to. So king e4 is the more accurate way to play this, and rook g8, king f5, rook g5 check, king e6. The king has marched all the way from f2 to e3 to e4 to f5 to e6, and my opponent resigned here in light of the fact that this poor rook is still trapped. He has no way to defend it. Rook e5 check just runs into king takes d7. Whenever you can make that many king moves in a row to win the game, I feel like that is deserving of the sexy chess title. So yeah, my opponent resigned here, and it was just game over. It really highlights the importance of trying to limit your opponent's play. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that and learned a thing or two. Thank you guys for watching that game. If you enjoyed that video and you learned a thing or two, please do subscribe to the YouTube channel. Leave a comment down below. I try to read all of the comments, and let me know if this type of content is something that you guys enjoy. Trying to show some quality but also aesthetically pleasing chess. And if you guys have any sexy games, please do post that in the comment below, the comment section below. I'd love to check them out. All right, guys. Until next time. Peace.